Hey everybody, I'm here with Ascot Smith, game narrative designer, writer, creative producer. He's developed interactive experiences and games for clients like Sony, Mattel, BMW, Exploding Kittens, and Dave& Buster's. Most recently, he has designed and wrote multiple Alexa games, including one for Ghostbusters, featuring the voice talents of Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson. Sounds amazing. See all the latest and greatest at their website, ascotjsmith.com. I'm Mars Ashton. I'm assistant professor of game design at LTU, and this is the International Game Developers Association kind of interview series that I do for the Detroit chapter, which I run. Typically, this is kind of a virtual interview where I invite a guest and we just kind of casually talk about the industry and what they do, who they are, both kind of within their role and outside of that. So, Ascot, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy I couldn't make it. I'm sorry that you guys, it's dark out there. Obviously sunlight's still out, but it'll get dark soon like it does everywhere else. Anyway, but yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I gave you a little intro, but who are you kind of beyond that? Like, what do you do outside the realm of games?
Sure. So yeah, I guess I could give a little bit of overview. I've been working in Los Angeles, or I've been out in Los Angeles since 2013, and where I pursued my master's at the USC's Interactive Media and Games program, and then from there, I've been mostly working as a freelance game designer and writer on mainly client projects that you mentioned. Before I moved out to Los Angeles, I was living in Kansas City and Philadelphia, where I was a practicing filmmaker and artist, also doing a lot of arts writing. I worked at a comic book store for a long time, wrote comic book reviews, worked at art museums. So I was very interested in fine art and comics and film for a long time. And then this kind of wound up pivoting towards games and interactive media, but kind of story-driven, experiences has always been what I've been kind of drawn to. When I was a practicing artist in Kansas City, I worked on some kind of location-based like narrative projects. Learning that I can kind of use gallery spaces to experiment with story and things like that, that wound up being kind of relevant to working in games and other interactive experiences. But that's the kind of professional end. I guess like personally, who am I besides work right now? Just staying safe and hunkering down and I like play chess. I like to work out. I like to hang out with my wife and play board games. So stuff like that.
Have you picked up any additional hobbies since the pandemic started?
I did. So I used to play chess like a lot. Like I played it in high school. I played it a little bit after undergrad. I was like slightly better than mediocre. I think I was never really great, but I've sort of like jumped back into it, I guess, since the pandemic a little bit. So I don't know. I mean, I do like buy comics like monthly, so I have like this white boxes stacked and hidden all over our apartment full of comics that will like never see the light of day after I've read them once. So that's like an unhealthy habit I don't recommend anyone picking up. So that's just something I've been doing for a long time. I'm trying to think of other hobbies. I don't know, watching a lot of movies. I wish I had like more exciting like hobby things that I could think of that I just was one of the ones that was lucky to able to keep working during COVID. I was really like, my work wasn't interrupted. I was, before COVID happened, I was on the Sony Pictures movie lot, which was like kind of this exciting childhood dream to be like, I get to go work at a movie lot and like make games based off properties at this film studio. So like all my interest is like being a filmmaker, an artist, and like game designer. It's just like, oh, this is like crazy. I get to like experience and be like, oh, this like actor is going to the lots, and like, oh, there's Alex Trebek like going to film Jeopardy or whatnot. But also just be able to have the opportunity to like make games based off their library and work with like talent that is kind of associated with this project. So, and then when COVID happened, it was just like just doing everything remotely was, just learning that process. Like I think everyone was needing to do. But yeah, because we're basically making games, our process wasn't really interrupted.
So your background within film and all that, kind of drew you to that, really. I mean, was that something that was like super appealing, I guess, to like, your employer, you landing that gig? Is that kind of varied background in addition to, skills related to what they needed you for?
Yeah, so I initially got brought on to that gig because they just needed a writer to help with, I guess what you'd call like voice user interface with the user experience. So it's basically writing the script for not any of the trivia that happens in a trivia game, but essentially all the kind of handoff between like, this is round one, this is round two, and like building up anticipation between like, oh, did you get the question right or did you not get the question right, things like that. But yeah, basically like sorry, I guess I should mention it was, I was brought in to help write for this Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game that they're developing for voice platforms. And yeah, my role was basically kind of writing all the non-trivia stuff for that. And I, part of the interview, I do remember them asking like, is this like you writing just like this trivia stuff? Is this what you're interested in? Or, I think they're just trying to gauge my long-term enthusiasm. Was this like, yeah, I mean, this is a place where, film and TV and technology are literally like converging. This is a space that I think there's a lot of potential in, and I was really excited about. And, was able to say like, yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I came to Los Angeles was to be in a space like this and make, this kind of cutting edge kind of tech influenced by kind of film and TV production. So yeah, it worked out really well for me as well.
Gotcha. You and I actually, we had crossed paths. I kind of met you through Taco Bell.
Right. Yes. We're both Taco Bell award winners, or the Feed the Beta.
Yeah.
I have a laurel with like Taco Bell in it. I made just for that. Why not?
Yeah, me too. It's a fun story, I think, to share, right? Like, so your game that was submitted was called Psychic, Per Eye That Eye, right?
Right. Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about the project, like how it came about? I have a couple of questions on that. I'm mostly looking forward to learning a lot more about, I think, that game, because I jumped into it, I had played it. It's something that's really kind of stuck around in my mind.
Oh, cool.
Like, ever since. So yeah, how did it come about? What was its origin story?
Right. So I had actually started that project while I was at USC. So that was kind of my I guess master thesis, was to make a project. So basically what I was interested in is trying to define what like an interactive TV show was, and kind of learning that no one understands what that means, and is like really kind of frustrated around this kind of concept. So I would get people from games would say like, well, if I want to watch a TV show, like I'm not going to play it, or like if I want to play a game, I'm just going to play a game. And I had people on the film and TV side basically be like, I don't even know, like, how does this exist? Like, what is it you're talking about? Like, how would people actually interact with it? So, so I tried to kind of practically like work this problem out. So I thought like, okay, well, an interactive TV show, it could be this thing that shows up like on an Amazon Fire TV, and it fits in between like a streaming platform, or it fits in between like a game that you would download. And so what I wanted to make was essentially like an interactive cartoon. So when you look at it, I think it's, I mean, I think it has elements of that, but ultimately I think it's just like a polished visual novel with voice acting. I think is ultimately what it is. I think it's, I don't know if it's really like, if it really got at like this interactive TV idea that I was interested in. But I do think the outcome, people feel very happy about it. And that brings me a lot of joy. Like the response to it is they're very excited about it. But that was like kind of the original idea, was that I wanted to kind of make something that would fit into these like kind of streaming middleware platforms like an Amazon Fire TV or Apple TV, and take advantage of it as a essentially like a computer and a streaming service, and make content that would you know, essentially leverage those constraints. But again, like the end result, I think is, it feels like if I were to call it an interactive TV show, people might just be like, well, I think it's just like a really fun visual novel. You know, it's like it's with some detective elements and some branching elements. So I don't know if it really cleared, you know, fulfilled those original criteria, but that was like, I guess the origin was, it was a USC thesis project where I was lucky to be able to work with people in the animation school. Had an art director that kind of helped us develop a pipeline to be able to, you know, essentially take character sketches and ink them, color them, animate them, and then essentially bring those assets into Unity. And we had built like the whole process kind of like in the first semester, and then the second semester was really like going, implementing and revising and kind of cutting a lot of stuff to just make sure that we had like a final polished single episode or mini teaser, I guess. But yeah, so that's, I don't know, I think that's the beginning of it.
It's really interesting. I did not know that that was like ultimately a student project. Knowing some of these intricacies of like, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, so this is actually like kind of hurt me a little bit, because like I have had people look at it and be like, well, this is not like student work. I've had people approach me and be like, can I come work at your company? And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I appreciate, like, I think of it as like a compliment. And then I've submitted this to like other events, and I think like it's kind of viewed as like, okay, well, who's this app developer? Like, what is this company? Like, it's not seen as like a student work. It necessarily gets like maybe the benefits of it being like more aspirational. I think in some ways it's like, you know, if we were to have made like the experience that you play is about 15 minutes long, but if we were able to release something that was closer to 40 minutes or maybe even an hour, then I think we would have something to sell and build a studio or, you know, a small company around, maybe. Or at least I'd be able to sell the single thing and, you know, see how that reacted in the marketplace, and then see if I can build, you know, more episodes. I think the thing that was released is too short to sell in the way that every other kind of branching narrative episode in the marketplace was like, oh, you get like a full hour for like, you know, like $4. So it's like, well, I can't charge people like $5 for 15 minutes. It's like, this is, you know. But anyway, but yeah, it started as a student project. People are like, you know, don't think it's a student project, which I think, you know, I guess it's a compliment. I appreciate
I mean, yeah, I think that like there's definitely a certain amount of like production quality, just in general, with what people are looking at. So it's funny to hear that like ultimately what was produced was on this really weird kind of borderline of like, okay, yeah, this is like it's a prototype, it's a proof of concept, like it's a really solid effort, to produce that, but at the same time it's like kind of on the lower end of like, well, it's not quite enough to be that like viable
Right.
product that could then bring in that income, which
Right.
I think
Yeah.
there's a lot that could be drawn from that. I think, just as a story about the industry in general, right?
Right. I mean, I think like, I mean, one thing I did, because like I said early on, I was just like, I thought of the Amazon Fire TV as this like this target, like this place to kind of execute this concept. And I wound up even having like a meeting with kind of the head of games of Amazon Fire TV at a GDC, and he was just like, "I think it's so cool that you're developing specifically for this, but we don't really care. Like, these devices are really just like kind of placeholders until they become powerful enough to compete against other gaming platforms." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense if you're like, Amazon's is a huge company; they could wait out anything they want. Like it's not really about." You know, it's not like Nintendo where they're like, well, we got to make this product, we got to make content specifically for this product to sell really well. That's why people will want to go buy it.
Mm.
Whereas for like Amazon, it's just like, well, like we have what is it, Roku at the bottom maybe, and then we have Apple TV at the top. So we're like, all right, we can just hug this middle ground and just like kind of wait that out until processors just become cheaper and cheaper, and then it's just the cost of manufacturing is going to determine where we sit in the market. It's like, okay, well, that's not a very content driven approach, but it's like, it makes sense to them.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny how that it's ultimately just like it was ahead of its time, right? It was this, I don't know, device specific, like device driven, wholly intended for fitting a certain kind of platform, but the
Right.
platform's just not kind of answering that call, right?
Well, now we see
So
like Apple
interesting.
TV, or Apple has their Apple Arcade now. Like they've now
Yeah.
worked with like, they're kind of doing, I mean, I mean, yeah, I mean, basically like you see there's, I kind of see that my instinct wasn't completely wrong. It's just that, maybe it would have made more sense to, yeah, like leverage a relationship with Apple. But I would never, it would have like, you know, it's just like, I would be guessing that would have ever panned out.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
It's funny how in like some ways that did kind of come true. Just wrong group, wrong company, right?
yeah, exactly. So, um, but yeah, I could talk about the game a little bit more in detail if you'd like, or if you had specific questions about what the process was like, or I don't know, like ultimately what happened with it, or anything like that.
Well,
I don't know.
I'll use this opportunity at least. The viewers. We actually have 17 folks watching on Twitch right now. Um, if you have any questions, by all means, ask. We'll get to that. I would like to hear more about this project. But we can kind of jump into some of these other questions and then circle back.
Sure.
So there was a little bit of discourse recently about like, does quality assurance count as like a game maker or a game developer? Have you come across this?
Um, I mean, I don't know. I assume the folks who like make those comments just are have no experience making interactive products, but
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
I think it has a lot to do with the one of the questions that I had, prompted you with in advance, and just how there's like certain assumptions about what it is to be a game maker, somebody who makes games. If we were to be asked what we do for a living, and we try to explain it, it could be kind of misinterpreted, right? Um, so I'm curious, like what is something about making games that you wish more people were aware of, So there maybe wasn't this kind of inexperience hot take on things.
Sure. I mean, I guess the QA one is like really obvious because like they're really like the front line. Like anything that goes into the game it has to be debugged, and having someone who actually can do the work to play through and repetitively test anything about your product it's essential. Like you can't make anything, you can't release anything, like nothing can exist without QA essentially going through a process and testing any feature and the content that gets put in your game. So they're definitely like the frontline defense. They're on the they're the ones out in the field like verifying if the thing that you are making like makes any sense or is working at all. So it's to me it's just it's absurd, I guess, but I guess it's just like like people just may not have the experience with the process is like, which I guess is what like where people like essentially have that idea. It's just like, oh, the designer thinks of it and then they code it and then it goes out in the world. But like we're always making assumptions about how people respond to things. And first of all, like you have to make sure that the expected outcome is working. And that's what QA is going to do, is kind of help verify that like when I push this button, it goes to the right screen. Because there's this mistakes. Like we're all human. It's inherently, that's just how it happens. There's always going to be bugs, but some of it's also like we all make assumptions about how things work. And it isn't until we go through that process that we see that like, okay, well, that assumption I had about this is not panning out. So we're going to have to make revisions based on, or make decisions based on, what data QA is collected. So, and as an indie developer, like, like getting like Psychic, at one point, Psychic was out on Apple TV, iOS, Android, and Amazon Fire TV. So that meant like essentially running QA on like all these different platform specific, builds, and also going through whatever certification that each of these platforms required. So, and a lot of this is just like making sure stuff doesn't crash, or like there's unique bugs that only happen because Unity and Android like don't want to talk to each other the way that that doesn't have a problem talking with like Apple. But it's a process to make sure that when your user experiences your game, they're not getting stuck on something like a button not working or like something not being communicated correctly. So I don't know, but I guess yeah, QA is really valuable. I don't know where this came from.
Yeah, I didn't dig too deep. I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it does seem to be something that pops up, and often it's a conversation that I have to have with like prospective students, as an academic, and kind of being in this role where I'm trying to bring in folks to a program and go through these degrees. At less and less over time, I have noticed that the questions of how valid is a game design degree come up, right? It used to be everybody wanted to know exactly how is this a waste of time? Is it a waste of money? But there's something going on, whether it's just, more and more people are playing games. There's more conversations going about, and these more like high level, perspectives on maybe just creation in general, design practices in general are more, I don't know, generally understood by the public. But that's just, my own take.
Yeah, I think about how like people on TikTok are essentially like learning all these film techniques that have been just kind of part of the lexicon of a bunch of filmmakers who like, oh, look at like I got to work on my transition game, or like all these things that are like used to be very specific, like kind of craft of filmmaking. And it's just that now that we have these, short video streaming, like shareable platforms, it's like the language for understanding what it takes to make things, I kind of hope is improving. Maybe folks are just also not recognizing how valuable their time is, which is, sometimes that's true. But, I think when people realize like how much thought that takes to just like make a video with a specific transition, and it's just like they're building like their own understanding of how the filmmaking process works, and then potentially, having appreciation about it. Maybe not like on any kind of, I don't know, maybe that's a little naive, but like in some ways, I just don't think that exists for games yet. Like it's still a very technical medium. And I think in general, people are just not aware of just how time consuming like making games are. Like starting a new project in games is always like the thing I hesitate. Like personally, I have not really been making my own work in games since I made that Psychic, just because like, well, I know how seriously time consuming this is to get it to the level of polish that I want. And it's just like kind of it's a big decision for me if I'm going to make a new product, like make a new game or not. So
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned overall. Just from this project to that project, and canceling this or choosing to work on this, and how to go about choosing everything. It's like, if I'm gonna really go all in on a solo project or something, it's gonna be 1 to 2 years of my time pretty heavily dedicated to not even just
right,
making it, but talking about it and preparing it, and you know um, working it out on this platform and that platform, and turning it into something that could be relevant, more worth my time through talks and presentations, and right.
right,
um, I mean, you've got this like very, very interesting background of it's heavily creative, from writing and film. I mean, what do you think has been like your edge? Like, what's been like your superpower because of that experience, that say somebody who maybe is only going into a program for game design would get? Like, what
sure.
wouldn't they get because of, say, your own perspective through those other creative mediums?
That's a good question. Um, well, I could say initially, like, so my experience, like going to USC, I did have kind of I had like one big struggle I kind of had to overcome, coming from having experience from all these other kind of mediums. And that was the sense that basically that like that game design or game production was way more collaborative than anything else I'd ever done. Where often like film or gallery art or whatever, it's always like, well, this is my vision, or this is the story. What is the best way to realize that? And games was a space where I, for a little while, struggled to kind of get over that sense that there's a hierarchy, and realize that, well, what you're trying to do is you're communicating with the player, and if things don't get communicated, it's not their fault. Like, it's not the user's fault that the thing you want them to understand isn't clear or they're not enjoying. And I think that was, I guess I'm telling you like the opposite of the edge. I guess the the baggage I had to get rid of in order to, I think, kind of find what I think what kind of gave me an edge. But the things that I learned was, because I made so many things, I would see people really intimidated to make things. They just weren't comfortable like making things and getting it out there and realizing like it's not going to be great at the beginning, and it's a process where you just have to keep, it's a revision, it's an iterative process. And I think that's the thing about games or any interactive experience that I do really enjoy, or what I was kind of drawn to the most, is just this kind of iterative process where it's never like, I mean, it's not like film or TV where that whole process becomes really baked. Like it becomes, it's a very clear, linear process in contrast. So I think so. My experience essentially making things, and not having to, and I guess because I came from a space that wasn't like game development, or that wasn't necessarily what I thought I would be pursuing. It meant that I never felt like I was relying on, I wasn't mimicking like other games, or it wasn't kind of necessarily copying conventions or tropes, where I kind of feel like I would see other students are like, oh, well, I want to make this game, but with this feature, or I want to make this game with this feature. And that just wasn't a path that I was on. I was kind of more interested in like, all right, well, this is a storytelling experience, and I want to figure out the best mechanics that will help convey that, and essentially help motivate the player to be invited to do that. And so in some ways, like not having that kind of traditional background going into games, I wasn't like hung up on sort of needing to compare the stuff I was working on to be like to other games necessarily, where I'd see people get really tripped up in that, or be like, yeah, this is like a cool idea, but where I would see other students work, and I would just be like, well, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're competing with like AAA companies. Like you need to find a way to make what you're doing stand out, and it's not going to be like, it has to be like something else that's unique, that isn't, that the audience does not find themselves comparing it to, like Call of Duty or Fortnite or whatnot. I'm trying to think what else was like a benefit. I mean, doing a lot of the kind of experimental narrative work fit really easily with a lot of games. Like a lot of the product stuff, I mean, some of the stuff I worked on has been games, but some of it hasn't. Like there was a project for BMW where they're interested in kind of storytelling and self-driving cars. So thinking about how to apply storytelling in a space that is still like doesn't have an established market, doesn't have like an established lexicon, or you're kind of having to kind of build how you communicate with a user. That's really helped me quite a bit, just because, a lot of the early unconventional stuff I was doing, like, that's just, there's no keyboard, there's no mouse. Like, how do you start to get people to interact with it?
Mm-hmm. I think it's really interesting, and maybe an observation that I had while you were explaining that is, a good way to summarize it, that like if the output is a game, we're kind of the sum of our parts. We're the sum of the experiences that we've had. And I've seen a lot of, even just at the student level, students tackling work that's like, they lean more towards the writing and the narrative side, where they're really just focused on telling that story, and they just happen to be using games as that medium to tell it. And then you do have the real heavy players who have been embedded in that, and that's kind of all they know, right? Just like the former might be film, and and writing is just so heavily like influencing them throughout their whole life, but they happen to also have this passion for this medium and so on. I think it's a really nice take on kind of getting into the field, as a medium, as an art form, and the like. I think it has a lot to do with all of the strengths that you've been able to showcase within your work, and the roles that you've taken on. Of course, you're embedded within these areas and developing those skills, and almost anything can be applied to game design on the creative spectrum, I would argue, right? So,
totally. And I guess like what? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, and I guess one thing that you kind of maybe hinted at was this like the need for a game design degree or whatnot. And I always kind of feel like that is a personal choice. At least for me, it was how I could pivot what I was doing, and essentially start to make like a actual career for myself. Whereas I felt like when I was a practicing artist and filmmaker, I was maybe showing, at galleries. Like I had a goal for myself. I'm like, I'm going to show at like 3 galleries a year. And I did that for like a couple years. But it was like, when you're making like like video installations, there's not really like a big market for that. There wasn't really a way to like keep sustaining that interest. So for me, it was like going to game design school was a way to really kind of focus all those interests and start to build a career around those interests, and really kind of help pivot and build that network that was necessary to make a living. But yeah, I guess it's something I think you had hinted at, and I felt like, well, it probably makes sense to touch base.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, this is a part of LTUX and the like. So I can promote the school a bit, but at the same time, what I'm about to say is probably a little alarming. Wouldn't be the first time I've said it publicly. But often with prospective students who are like, again, questioning, is this worth it? Is this worth the money, the investment? This is a serious decision to make. What should I do? And I tell them, the industry really isn't going to require some 4-year degree from this school or that school, right? Like it would be entirely possible for somebody to get into a multitude of areas within the industry, not going into a program at LTU, right? Or anything similar remotely. And I think a lot of it has to do with many of the things we discussed tonight, whether it's, misinterpretation, just lack of experience or understanding of exactly what, it takes to say, create something as complex as this type of game. But also it's like still relatively new, probably still be saying this for decades to come, but it's a medium that still has folks going to school for a number of different things, and they end up finding a career within this realm, right? Within that industry. And, maybe more so than a lot of other creative fields, it's so relevant, and it's, so like completely applicable to whatever they may be doing, because, a game I'm working on would be almost a completely different thing than a game or an experience, an interactive experience that you might be working on, right? Of course, there's like a shared kind of bone structure, skeleton of things and design patterns and everything that they follow, but and usually that kind of it catches everybody's attention when I say I work for a college. You don't have to go. You don't have to go to this college to get into the industry. But at the same time, like it speaks to the breadth that a skill set in any area relevant to it could appeal to. And we're in Michigan, right? We have campuses in Detroit. We have programs with pretty heavy, deep connections with the automotive industry and stuff. That's Michigan, right? Automotive.
Right.
And we've had a lot of students who jumped in and they're like, they worked on a senior project and it's this really great game and it's cool, but the legitimacy of them going and like pitching that and selling that, it's, that's not really the outcome. It's that they built it, they made it, they collaborated, they developed all of these skills and kind of the ability to talk shop a little bit, which then appeals to, the automotive folks looking for these experienced creators, right? Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. It's perfect. We can jump over questions if anybody has them. I'm gonna check in on the coordinators here if they have anything to ask or share. Give them a sec. Is there anything you are working on now? Anything that you want to plug or anything while we have a sec?
What? Yeah, I mean, do I have? I guess everything I'm working on personally is kind of still in the process mode. Not anything necessarily to point to, but yeah, if you have a Amazon device and you're a big fan of Ghostbusters, or if you have a kid who's really into Barbie, I think those games that we made were kind of fun. And the thing about the Barbie game we made is just like, oh wow, I'm sure there's some kid out there that is just like so excited they literally get to speak to the voice of Barbie. Like just that aspect of it, I'm sure like blows people's mind. Similar to like the people who are huge Ghostbusters fans who are like, I get to like talk to Dan Aykroyd, like he's going to ask me a question and I literally like get to like respond to that. So yeah, I mean, those are experiences that are out there. I think they're interesting and they were fun to make. So yeah, check those out. And if you have an elected device, then yeah, let me know if you enjoyed it.
So you wrote words that Dan Aykroyd then said. Am I understanding your role right?
That is correct. There were two other writers on that project, but there are a lot of there are like specific like functional dialogue. Like I think we have been like, well, I don't know if who cares? There's like an Easter egg where basically if you like curse at the game, Dan Aykroyd or Ernie Hudson may like basically tell you to knock it off.
Yeah.
So there's like fun little Easter eggs like that in there. There's a lot of like interesting functional dialogue. Like if you exit the game, he's gonna like give you a message, and you're graded on like your performance, and him and Ernie like show up and talk. Basically they're like the funny. I thought the ones where they admonish you for your performance are like a lot funnier than necessarily the ones where you're really good at the job, but sometimes harder to write like, oh, you're doing great, to put a punchline versus like somebody trying to like be nice but also tell you did something bad. It's like pretty funny.
Geez, yeah.
Yes, so that was really like a really crazy unique experience. Like
I bet. Even sure. I don't want to undersell Ernie Hudson, of course, either. We kind of focused on Dan Aykroyd there, but like either of them writing and then having them read aloud, I imagine that was quite an experience.
Yeah, they're great. They're great too because they were just like, look, we don't know like what it is that you're making, so like feel free to direct us like if there's anything we're just not hitting correctly or we don't understand, because we're just like they're probably not making a lot of, I mean, there's of course they're doing like voice acting work or have experience doing voice acting, but maybe not like a ton of game voice acting since the previous like Ghostbusters game where they did for back in like, was it 2006 or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You had mentioned too, like working with Mattel and a Barbie game and stuff. It's like I feel like those are even some areas of the industry that like back in like 2006, when I was going around to conferences and meeting with folks, it was kind of a running joke of like, you want to work for Blizzard and you want to work for this company, but you're going to end up working on My Little Pony. And it was kind of like, dismissive of like
Sure.
making a My Little Pony game. But the fact was, it was like, we'd still be working on My Little Pony. And maybe this is,
Yeah.
before, My Little Pony is, exploded and culturally, but
Right.
it's
Well,
still
yeah, I
this,
mean,
amazing property, right? That would be, and it's like an honor to be a part of in any way.
yeah, I mean, I try not to ever be like discouraged by whatever the opportunity is to, essentially be paid to make, especially like kids games. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways you're right, because like now like every brand, like every IP has this, it's been revived and kind of really targeted, and is a lot more sophisticated now than it was, yeah, like even just 2006, I guess. But it's like any of those type of projects, like I had, like when I was writing lines for Barbie, I was just like, I don't like, what do I know about necessarily like writing for this character? And but I still tried to be sincere about the, essentially the task that I was, kind of set to work on. And, in some ways it was kind of, eventually I like could get into it. Like, okay, well, she's just like aspirational. She just wants you to do a really good job. Like, she just wants to be your friend. Like, that's like actually really interesting to potentially write for. I mean, there's parts where it's just like, well, Barbie can't really tell you you're not doing very well, or that you've like did a bad, like you got like a lower grade. Like, so what's like the nice way that Barbie can say like, well, next time we'll do even better. It's just like there's always like idiosyncratic elements in which like the brand is just like, yeah, Barbie would not say like you did a bad job. She would never literally say like you're not very good at this. So things things like
It's
that are
interesting.
fun.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, like I said, I feel like it's kind of it's an area of the industry that a lot of people kind of, they, maybe it's not as considered as it should be, right? Like, these maybe properties that are more geared towards children. I mean, having two boys, and having a tablet, and all of these other platforms for them, and seeing the kind of content that's geared towards them, and the YouTube series, and the like, that's like watching Coco Melon's rise. I don't know if you're familiar with Coco Melon.
And I'll definitely look it up.
It's, yeah, so there's things like this that, it's like the Roblox of things, right? That it's
Okay.
there, people are aware of it, but they don't realize like how important it is, or how important it's going to be. And this goes back
Yeah.
to you making this really good observation about things like TikTok, and people, uh, younger generations being so much more naturally inclined to engage with this, like, kind of shorthand sequential, like content creation, right? Where they're making videos, and the craft of that kind of becomes just a way to interact with others. So naturally, they're just incentivized to do it well, because if they do it well, more people are going to respond, and they're
Right.
looking at it at a very like high level, like marketing, and it's weird. We could talk about that a lot, but you know we're dealing with like a generation that's growing up within this Roblox community. They're getting into modding. They're seeing more than ever, like more accessible tools, than ever, and like a very quick, very obvious, like monetary, uh, ultimately like channel for them to jump into.
Right.
And every now and then I see discussion on Twitter, and some people kind of referencing it and stuff. Like every now and then there's a little bump where people start to maybe consider, say, a franchise like Roblox, a little bit more seriously. But um,
Right.
I'm curious where things are going to go with that. This is, I guess, what my what my take is.
Right. Well, if there's a market in it, it'll continue to grow. So
Yes, yes. Um, Okay, well, I think we're closing out here. Ascot, again, thank you so much for joining me. Really great conversation. It's been an honor being able to talk to you here. So thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me, Mars. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we could chat more about our Taco Bell brotherhood again sometime in the future.
Yeah, we have a third Taco Bell brother actually in the audience, Steven Zavala of Wave Crash, who's a part of the previous panel here as part of the LTUX event here. He's
Cool.
been chit chatting in the Twitch. Shout out to Steven Zavala here.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah. Thanks again. Have a good night. I'm gonna hand it off to Joel and Evan. But
all right. Thanks for coming, guys.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.